Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Laura Gordon. Laura is a psychology PhD student. She is an athlete. She's been a very high-level soccer player who's sustained injuries that honestly were really sucky, and she's had to endure those things. She's also gotten into strongman and Ironman triathlons in the not-too-distant past here, and she's going to continue doing those pursuits. Laura and I had a really awesome conversation about health psychology, psychology in general, physical training, kindness and compassion in the fitness and health space, and a lot more. This was probably one of my favorite episodes in regards to like talking about psychology and talking about humans as complex biological, cognitive, and emotional creatures. We need support, we need friendships, we need guidance, and we need to move. I really, again, appreciate Laura coming on. You can find her at Laura Health Psych on Instagram. I'll link her Instagram handle in the show notes. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your time. This is a great episode. Hope you enjoy it. Peace. Nice to talk to you, Laura Gordon. We were just briefly chatting, and we almost got into some really good topics, so I had to cut us off and get the episode started. But I wanted to start this off with you just telling me and anybody who's going to listen to this who you are. And I'm honestly going to have you kind of start with your injury journey, honestly, let's call it your athletic journey. So are you cool with doing that to open up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I played soccer for the greater part of 17 years when I was a kiddo into my adolescence and then a young adult. So I started in elementary school, played all the way through college, and did a year of the semi-pro-ish team that was in San Diego at the time because there wasn't the NWSL. And so at the end of collegiate soccer, it was sort of like the end for athletes unless you wanted to play in this kind of mock semi-pro league or go to Europe. And so throughout my journey in those 17 years, I had 5 major surgeries and definitely experienced the spectrum of surgeries and recovery and what that does to you mentally as an athlete, how you navigate feeling like you're falling behind, and also what it feels like to engage with life without your passion. I was definitely a consumed athlete. I lived and breathed soccer. I did track to prepare for soccer. I willingly engaged in a sport that's probably not everybody's favorite, but I was like, this is going to make me a better runner for soccer. And then when I was in my first round of graduate school, I was at law school at the University of San Diego. I was playing soccer and had the blowout of all blowout injuries. It was something called a Liz Frank fracture and dislocation. And so it required a surgery for a metal in, metal out, and surgery to repair my arch tendon that had ruptured in the process. So it was a long haul. It was 8 months. And that was sort of the end of my ability to say, I can pick up some cleats and go play soccer. It was, I have to sort of find new alternatives now and really start diving in and exploring. And so this happened when I was 24. And I hadn't known anything other than a life that was fueled by soccer before then. Even when I was in graduate school, I was constantly chomping at the bit to get out of class, to get down to the field, to go do that activity that made me feel okay. And so in realizing that I didn't have it anymore, I had to start experimenting and learning and understanding what I liked, what I didn't like. So I did powerlifting for a little bit. I got involved in CrossFit. I had a brief run with the Team USA bobsled team. And then most recently, I've picked up strongman and have been pairing that with training for some pretty intense endurance events. I've done a 50K ultra, a 50-mile ultra, and my first 70.3 Ironman.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's a heck of a journey. And you've settled into almost, some people would be like, those are radically opposed things to pursue. But I personally, I love it because I really think most of the stuff is actually more complementary than people actually make it out to be.
Yes, yeah.
You're also an athlete, so it's just doing the thing, right? But tell me more about just we both kind of connected over the fact that humans, we're in a very human, like health is a human thing, and it's not simple. And it's you mentioned compassion before we started talking, but like, I mean, that a lot of people don't think about fitness and compassion per se, or even, we should think about compassion with health. But what did your journey, and I love soccer. I grew up playing soccer. I was not an amazing player, but I also, I tell this story on a regular basis because it really is what helped me fall in love with training in general. Is like, I was just not very fast. We had to run 3 miles to make the team. And so I just went to the route on like a cold winter night one day, and I just like started running, and I got good at running 3 miles so I could make the team. And then I played soccer throughout high school. I probably could have kept playing in college at some level if I wanted to, but all that being said, like there are these athletic drives that like keep us going and like make us feel certain ways, and it's hard when those things are taken away.
Yes, yes. So what really started to shift in like my athletic journey, especially now where I'm at, is starting to take extreme ownership of the internal dialogue that I have going on when I work out, and starting to realize when I was younger how I was using it as a way to reinforce some really negative thoughts that I actually had about myself. I would say that when I was really young, especially with kind of like a less than optimal home environment, I was letting a lot of anger fuel the energy, and it was reflected in the internal dialogue that I had in my head about who I was and everything around me. And so it looked like I was a really good athlete, but I was coming from a place of energy and anger that was not great, and it wasn't going to serve me for the long term. And it wasn't until I really started diving into training and what it looked like to train 5-6 days a week and to feel good about it from a sense of like, I'm proud of what I've done. I'm happy to go to training today, or, like that workout felt good. Like those conversations were things that I wasn't really having with myself. It was originally like, did I kill myself today? Did I go hard enough? Like, did I prove that I was good enough to be there? And it shifted more so when I actually started to intentionally train for things that I was bad at, like endurance training, to how did that feel in my body? I felt really good. I was proud of the fact that I held that pace. And I started to really notice a shift in how that was translating into every facet of life. And so I think that there's a mixed bag right now in the fitness world of internal experiences that are going on that are coming out in a way that is maybe less than community building. And so really cultivating and concentrating on that internal sense of compassion, I think helps bring out the external community building and compassion that we're capable of. And that's something that once I started doing it for myself, I noticed it being reflected back to me in how I coached. And my coaching style as well. It really started to shift. So that was a really important journey for me on bringing compassion into fitness. And it started with looking at me, myself, and what's going on in my head during a workout.
Yeah, that's very powerful because, I mean, we're going to get into this, and this is a good segue. I didn't really realize how much the narrative in my head was driving like my external, and you can like still make progress even with without maybe compassionate self-talk or kind self-talk, but I do think a lot of people let this sense of for me it was definitely a sense of inadequacy or like worth, right? And to some extent, like that stuff never truly goes away, but like you do get better at managing it. And I also think humans are constantly shifting their own goalposts, and that makes it very, very hard to feel any sense of contentment, right? And like fitness really should be like I think there's a lot of layers. Fitness, and I'm just gonna call it fitness, like strength training. The reason I just always call it training in my like content is because like there is a difference between like I'm just going out to get activity and like I'm training my mind and body for something, for a purpose. Neither one is right or wrong, right? But like, yeah, so much of the space, becomes about like it's one thing, like, oh, this is what it's about, and it's like, no, it's so much more than that. From like a pain and injury standpoint, it's the best thing for people is to learn to manage their body and understand, like, a lot of this stuff, like, it sucks, like, you've had like really serious sucky injuries, like, that sucks, but also you've just proven, like, I can come back from those things. And even though the hard part about a lot of like sports is like they do force a level of workload on people that is really hard to manage, right? And it almost has to be singular, like a singular focus. So, all right, you went to law school.
Yes.
So you're a lawyer,
I
or
don't
you have a J.
practice.
Yeah,
I
you
have
have
a
a
JD,
JD.
yeah.
Yeah, you have a
Yeah.
JD. Okay, so that's cool. You don't have to practice. I think it's cool. So, but now you're doing. What are you studying now?
So I pulled the 180 when I realized I didn't like law. I was very insecure and lacked a lot of confidence when I lost soccer. And I listened to people tell me that you're competitive, you're intelligent, your family has, like, I have a history of lawyers in my family. Law would be a great fit for you. I didn't know, like, who I was outside of soccer, so I listened to that, and was very unhappy in law school. And so I had to really sit down and think, well, what did I love about soccer, and how can I actually help that guide me on the choice and path that I do next, because this isn't it right now. And I realized that I loved being a teammate, and I loved, like, the opportunity to be in a community and to pursue a collective goal that was greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, that was truly what made soccer so meaningful for me and what kept me going for 17 years. And so I was like, well, now that I know and understand this better, I want to find this in a career pursuit. And so I have a master's now in clinical counseling. And that, to me, really started to replicate this teamwork idea, because in mental health, our goal as clinicians is not to fix you, not to tell you what's wrong with you, but to walk beside you while you are working through the difficulties of life, so that you don't feel alone and that you have positive feedback along your journey. And that, to me, in that team like role, was phenomenal. And in my work, I started to specialize and work with military veterans, first responders, law enforcement officers, and I worked a lot with domestic violence survivors and offenders. And I started to realize the role, the depth of the role that stress was playing, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in these diagnoses and experiences, and how poorly it was integrated into how we work with these clients. So the role of the physical health, the physiology, is really understated in clinical counseling. And so I was like, man, it would be really cool if there was something like applied behavioral neuroscience or health psychology. So I started looking at programs. And Clemson, this is actually its first year of having its PhD program in health psychology, was like, we're taking applicants, we're finally up and running. And I was like, do I do this? And because I'm originally from San Diego, so I've lived in California my whole life. And I applied to a couple other programs, but I really connected with who is now my supervisor at Clemson University. And she is a qualitative researcher in the field of positive psychology and specializes in understanding courage, and is a part of the health psychology team in looking at the role of courage in health psychology. So that's especially really looking at cultivating positive emotions to help counterbalance some of the negative ones that we feel, like depression and anxiety. Not specifically looking to alleviate those, but if we build up positive feelings like hope, courage, resilience, how can that help us move through difficult physiological and mental issues? And when I was looking at her work and kind of like the trajectory that she saw for it in health psychology, I was like, this is great. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I applied, and I'm working out here now. I really have leaned into the idea that I believe that mental health is greater than the pathology of depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And I think that what we need to be able to offer individuals looking to work on their mental health is more than just a clinical setting. And
Yeah.
so, under the umbrella of positive psychology and health psychology, I'm really keen on looking into community programs that build positive affect, like courage. And so now I work in equine therapy out here, which is something that I believe doesn't exactly mitigate anxiety or depression, but it emboldens help-seeking behavior and it creates approach coping behavior mechanisms. So I will lean into things that are difficult. And I'm researching with Dr. Puri now, graduate teaching assistant in Clemson, and I've never felt more aligned, or like the entire journey that I had with soccer and everything that I loved about it coming into fruition than I have right now. So it's been a long haul, like a decade's worth, but it's finally kind of coming together in a way that I don't think I could have ever imagined.
How old are you now?
34.
So, I mean, that's like, yeah. And I mean, I'm 37 and it's wild. It takes, I would tell my 25-year-old self, like, it's going to be okay. Now, it doesn't mean, like, life, I think, you touched on a lot of really good stuff there. I have, like, such, like, physiology and psychology based interpretations of like what I would call health. Like I really don't think we can dichotomize mental and physical health. Like I really don't, and I think you would agree with that based on just your general approach, right? I also like life is an active process, and like even when I went in, I first and foremost I felt guilty about like doing talk therapy. It's like I shouldn't need to talk to somebody about my problems. When really like humans need support, and we're becoming more and more like it's weird, we're becoming more and more closed off from each other in like very real ways, right? And so but like talk me through some of you're using words like courage, right? And like people are like, well, what is it? Like these are words, but one of the things that really helped me was, and it still helps me, is Stephen Hayes's acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy. Which it's just a very clear, relatively clear, like identify. I didn't even know what values were until I was like 33 years old, right? I knew like what values were, but I didn't really know some of these concepts, right? But what is it about like courage or I talk about like avoidance is not really a good strategy for anything, but it's also like it's the easy strategy. It gives you a sense of relief in the short term, but in the long term you don't really learn anything or you grow from it. So but like talk about like the conceptual understandings that people missed, if that makes sense.
So I think right now, in a lot of what is displayed through social media and what I can garner from that, courage and avoidant coping have been really conflated based on social expectations. And I see this a lot for heteronormative males who are trying to be stoic, in control, masculine, and trying to embody this socially accepted idea of what we have, of what it means to be a man. And it is manifesting in a manner that is of what I would deem avoidant coping. Because if you're trying to live towards those ideals, but there is internal turmoil, suppression and avoiding the internal turmoil will not serve you in the long run. At some point, whether it's I can't form like consistent long-lasting relationships, whether it's I have really difficult problems with my anger, it comes out in a way that is likely not something that we enjoy or facilitates a life that is meaningful for us.
Yeah.
So using ideas like courage, especially moral courage, value courage, to challenge society's oppressive standard for what it means to be certain things, I think is something that I am so keen on doing. Because if you look at reaching for help as a courageous act and you start to have this really positive association with it, rather than waiting a couple years after something that was really difficult for you to finally say, you know what, I'm at my breaking point. I'm having trouble leaving my home. I haven't done the dishes in 3 weeks. Like, I need help. You'll be apt towards doing it a little bit sooner on your journey and helping you to kind of get back to these more functional patterns earlier on. So that is a way that I think courage will help us reconceptualize certain behaviors and actions and ideals that we work towards. I also think that courage has the capacity to help us, maybe more so. I don't know if you've ever heard of narrative therapy. But the modality of narrative therapy really helps people to shift from an idea of, okay, I'm someone who has been harmed, to I am now the protagonist of my story.
Yeah.
I've, in the cinema that is Laura's life, I've endured something difficult, and because of that, now I'm courageous and I'm going to step forward into this new version of myself.
Yeah.
And so it helps with a lot of the identity shifting processes that we go through in therapy. Because stepping into a new version of yourself or engaging in some type of change behavior, like quitting alcohol use, is scary. That's a huge new world that we have a lot of uncertainty about. We don't feel confident in our ability to live in this new identity. So if I'm lacking confidence, but I'm working with someone on cultivating courage, I might be more likely to step in more fully and sooner into those roles.
Yeah. So you're touching on like a lot of really, yeah, we definitely vibe. Like I'm a physical therapist, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not a psychologist. In many ways, I have done a lot of psychology work. But what is always evident though is how much we lose sight of like the forests for the trees and with a lot of these stuff. And this isn't like I went it's these old, and you talking about narrative therapy makes me not want to use narrative, but like these stories that people tell, like, even to this day, like, don't get me wrong, SSRIs, like, I'm not gonna go down like a don't do drugs for don't use drugs for like psychopharmacology. Like I took an SSRI for a year and I was like glad that I did, but I also like realized, okay, I'm taking actions that are helping me and I feel good. And I weaned myself. I didn't wean myself. My doctor and I took myself off of it, right?
Yeah.
But the narrative is like, oh, well, it's just chemical imbalance. And it's like, no, there's an action imbalance too. Like if you are
Yes.
not living, even, there's nothing wrong with using a pharmaceutical to help you do something. But it's just like if you get put on a blood pressure medication and nobody ever talks to you about how you can start to work on managing your own blood pressure. And even then
Yes.
you could still be unsuccessful. And like that's where the compassion piece of this comes in. But I mean, I remember when I was really low and I was in a traditional kind of crappy PT clinic, and this woman was like she was postpartum. And she's like, my mom doesn't, and we were talking about stress because like I was always talking about like what stress, because stress is going to affect us physically. And she's like, my
Yes.
mom doesn't want me to go on medication. And she's like a 22-year-old woman with a daughter. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about what your mom says. If it will help you and you think it will help you, then you should try it, right? But this is the hard part about like humans is we have all these social influences on us, and they can be good or bad. Have you ever read How Emotions Were Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett?
I haven't.
So, I mean, do you know, how much about like predictive processing are you familiar with predictive processing?
A little bit.
Okay.
And I like from the cognitive psychology component of it, of like, how do I make choices?
Yeah.
But beyond that, not too much.
It's like, okay, because like in my own field, you're like, this is the thing about all these fields, but I'm like falling in love with predictive processing right now because essentially like our brain is a prediction machine. Like but so much of like how emotions are made is like, oh, we think that sadness is a universal emotion, and like everybody experiences sadness, but everybody has their own flavor of that, right? And like one of her big things is like the best thing for our nervous system is typically another human. But
Yes.
also the worst thing for our nervous system is other
There's
humans.
another human.
So it's like you have to navigate all these things. I'll even say like I have a conversation with like a colleague going on right now that like it's kind of weird, like personal, and it like makes me feel like shit, even though nothing was really bad about it. And it's like this is where we get ourselves. And so if I didn't understand like values and how to like my self talk, I would honestly be really like angry and take it really personal, right? That type of thing. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but let's keep talking about okay, you're working with I'm gonna call it like a more of an embodied approach to helping people. Like we're gonna hit people with community, and
Yes.
we're gonna help people see the connection between. I think okay, let's. This is where I want to go because I remember now. The male, the heteronormal male
Yeah.
psyche is yeah like, and I also think men have misunderstood what stoicism like is. Like I don't think the stoics were like not emotional. I think they just had some stuff figured out 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't cry for like 10 years, and then like I finally cried and it like felt good, and it's like okay, like,
Yeah.
and every 4 to 6 months I'm like, you need to cry, and I probably should do it a little bit more often than that. But
Yeah.
what is it about like, yeah, maybe it's American men, maybe it's men in general, but yeah, like I didn't access my emotions honestly till I was like 32. I didn't even
Yeah.
understand them. So like, what are you seeing, and then how are you helping? Or how do you want to help, if that makes sense?
This is a huge, huge passion of mine. So I'm going to pick one sort of thing that I'm working on, and then the framework that I work through, I use for every facet of how I want to help men feel better. The first way that I really try to work with a lot of, especially heteronormative male clients. So I'm a guy, I like girls, I'm trying to be a man in society, I'm struggling, I'm feeling down. The first question that I like to ask is, when was the last time that you felt safe? And that, for a lot of men, is a really difficult question because they don't think about their own safety. They're constantly thinking about the safety of others or the people that they care about. The reason why I like to ask it is because, for me, I think that I am really good at being able to provide people with or act in a manner that's consistent with things that I understand. So if I know what safety feels like in me, then I can create it for other people. It's easier for me to understand and to see. It's easier for me to identify when there's a misalignment with my values of safety. When we don't do that inner work to understand what a value or a feeling is like for us, it's really difficult and sometimes dysregulating to see inconsistencies in other people. So when you look a lot of times at interpersonal conflict, like if I'm a guy and I'm just trying to be a man and I have this idea about what it looks like, but I'm getting negative feedback from my partner, that's going to be really dysregulating to me. I'm thinking I'm not good enough. I'm thinking I haven't done this well enough. I'm thinking all of these negative things now that are going to shut me down and bring up defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
And that is sort of a little window into what I think is the biggest block for men not only creating strong interpersonal romantic relationships, but also friendships. I think that I've been seeing a lot of footage lately about guys talking about how difficult it is to have quality friends and to have those long-standing friendships where there is maybe some vulnerability and I get to share this with someone that I trust and can lean on.
Yeah.
And so that's the framework and the approach that I use for safety. But then when it comes to any difficult emotion that comes up, we start there and we say, well, what does it feel like for you? What does it feel like for someone to care about you and to love you? And you get sometimes some really stiff, mechanisms, or, the next thing that comes out is, well, I'm actually unlovable. It's like, okay, well, where does that belief come from? And we start to really build on ideas that as a society, whether it was in your home, whether it was at school, whether it was a close caregiver, maybe a grandparent, at some point we learned and really imprinted at some peak developmental periods that men aren't allowed to feel as much as women are. And that's and doing the work in your 30s, it's arduous, it's so difficult, it's like sometimes awkward and painful, and you're like, I don't even think this is working. And then right when you have that thought, you're like, all right, there was a breakthrough. I was able to cry, or I was able to connect more meaningful with my partner, and we didn't fight, we actually had a conversation.
Yeah.
But that's the other part of it, is that it's, as much as I want these conversations to be beautiful and like a weight is lifted off of your shoulder, you have to go through some difficult stuff first and grappling with these concepts before it starts to actually feel good.
Yeah. There, you touched on a lot of really, I mean, I even am like, I need more like men friends, you know, and like the imprinting or the learned, so, and well, it's tricky too. Because I think like, I do. So you mentioned extreme ownership, right? Early on, and taking extreme ownership. Did you ever
Yeah.
read Jocko's book? Did you ever read that
Yeah,
book?
it's a guiding thing in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I love that book. That book, honestly, it was. I read that when I was like on a clinical, one of my first clinical rotations, and the first thing I stopped doing was just like trying. I stopped trying to like make excuses. Like, you know, if I did something, I screwed up. I was like, yep, I screwed up. And it changed my life. Like, it was hard and scary, but it
Yes.
was so much better, right? And it's like, you know, because I remember reading that book, and then like I did something. I was a student, and like, yeah, so like you're meant to screw up, but instead of like, we should know that as like students that it's okay. Like, and this is kind of ties into being a man. Like, you're gonna screw up. Like, I screw up with my wife and my kid all the time, and what is best is to just own it. And again, I still one of my favorite, well, the guy who helped me get out of like what I would call my really low state, he's like, you know, like a lot of how we behave as adults is just 8-year-old behavior. We're just like, we're in that like keep me safe, but we
Yes.
don't realize it. And because we're 35 years old or because we're 50 years old, we can rationalize it. But when you're
Yes.
8-year-old, it's just like that kid's having an emotional thing.
And that tantrum, keep it
Yeah.
away.
And as an adult, this is where I'm going, is like we should learn to harness our emotions in ways that are actually positive, but that doesn't mean
Yes.
suppressing them,
Yes.
right? It means communicating them. And like this is something like my wife is good at. Like now I also you mentioned, it's funny, like the safety, like what I think of as safety is solving the problem. What my wife thinks about is just let me just process it, and like, you know, and that's okay. And so it's like
Look at
learning that.
you.
Yeah. So, and I still struggle with it. Like relationships are
Yeah.
really freaking hard. Like there's a reason that they're hard, and that's also why they're good, right?
Yeah.
They can be good anyway. So, God, you hit on a lot of good stuff there. Well, and I think this is a good kind of segue into just talking more about fitness, because fitness, so much of like the content out there is like a superiority thing or a
Yes.
perfection thing, or
Yeah.
we're pursuing, and like all training, like I don't know what if this is totally true, but like I think we lost. It's always been tricky, but you know, people started lifting weights and doing hard physical things because it made them feel good after it.
Yes.
Or probably kind of during it. It sucked, and then it made them feel good, and then after the fact, and then they realized like, oh, this makes me more resilient and capable. Then there's always been people who have been like kind of afraid of it, and I think that's one of the big things we need to do is help people realize like you can start easy, you can start light, you can
Yes.
go slow, it's okay. But what is it? You mentioned again compassion. Like, what do you want to see more of in like fitness and strength training and all that type of stuff? What do you think would be more beneficial for people if you had to like critique the current landscape?
So I'm going to start with my own journey as a coach, because I think that when I was first training, I really leaned into working with field athletes, and I was falling back on the experiences that I had had growing up. And so I was really stoic, kind of hard. The line was really firm with my training. I wasn't super interactive with the girls that I trained. And then I got into my clinical program and I read about attachment theory. And there's a concept in attachment theory that talks about the secure base. And that as parents and caregivers, if we create a secure base for our child to return to, they will go out and challenge the outer parameters of what they think that they're capable of or what they feel curious about because they know they have somewhere safe to return to.
Yeah.
And at this point, so I had just kind of gotten my feet wet with it's a good pun in a second. I got my feet wet with attachment theory. I started working with a group called Deep End Fitness, and we were doing water confidence training. And I was like, I want to take this approach of being a secure base for my classes and seeing what they're capable of in pushing these outer parameters of carbon dioxide tolerance. And so there was never any yelling. There was an arbitrary standard that existed outside of us that the water held. And my role was to encourage, pinpoint moments of hesitation, and to come in and to use compassion and articulating what it would feel like to be courageous and encourage those individuals to go challenge what they thought was the outer parameters for themselves. Right? It wasn't like everyone in the class needed to hit a 50 underwater. It was everyone in the class needed to find their outer threshold and push 1 second past that. And then they could come back to me on the wall and I would be their secure base. And that was the most success I have felt as a coach in cultivating those positive experiences for the participants in the water. And to me, in an environment where there's not a lot of safety, I was able to create that really secure base and safe experience.
Yeah.
And after that now it's truly, so that's what my dissertation is going to be on, is because courage is deeply interpersonal. A lot of times it requires us performing for another or going against the ideas of a greater society. There's some duality to courage, whereas grit and resilience are maybe a little bit more of like that internal dialogue. So how do we use these interpersonal moments to really cultivate change behaviors, to get people to lean into the difficult? Because as human beings, we don't really like change and we don't really like discomfort. That's a survival mechanism. But we're realizing now as we want to pursue healthier, longer lives, we have to find a way through it. Yeah. And for me, finding a way through it is strong interpersonal connections with coaches, mental health clinicians, researchers who are focused on a base of safety and compassion first, and allowing these external challenges to be the goal that people work towards, knowing that they always have that secure, safe base to come back to. And I think that the more that we create environments where the challenge is not the coach, the challenge is not the person, the challenge is not the parent yelling, it's you're going to go out into the world and experience this. You're going to stop using substances to suppress. You're going to engage in these behaviors that are going to help you lower your blood pressure. And if anything happens, you're allowed to come back here. We can recalibrate, reorient, but then you can go try again. And so I definitely think that courage plays this really, really strong role in change behavior models and then helping us to understand how important interpersonal safety is in wanting to be courageous.
Give me I love all that. Like, I mean,
Cool.
just using the lens of attachment theory to, I mean, yeah, because that's what so much, whether it's physical rehab is honestly like, what's the safest, hardest thing we can do? And then like, okay, let's dial that up a little bit. Right. And there's also a level of like, there's always risks and rewards with everything, right? But knowing someone is supported is huge, right? That's really cool with the water confidence. Yeah, like God, I'm envious of you growing up in San Diego. I love San Diego. I also wanted to be so I'm gonna just give you some of my psyche. Like I wanted to be a Navy SEAL since the time I was like 12, and I like told everybody. Like this is where a lot of my guilt and like frustration came out. Is like it was just they were badass. They were badass dudes, and like they do hard shit, and they're like they're elite, and like I had built it into me. And then at some point, I just was afraid. I just really was. I couldn't jump. I couldn't jump into the military. Like, my parents didn't want me to. I actually had talked to recruiters, and my parents were like, dude, you, like, no, like, you're going to go to college.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really rebellious. And, but yeah, then there was this sense of, when I hit like 28, I did physical therapy school because it was a challenge. I liked school. I was a political science major in undergrad. I almost went to law school. Like, I thought I was going to go to law school. I was
Okay.
history and political science major. But
Yeah.
when it came time to like put down, like, dude, you're not gonna be a Navy SEAL. Like, I felt like guilt and shame, and like that I had told people that I had said I wanted to do this thing and that I didn't do it. And like, there's a lot to that, but there is this sense of, well, what was it really about? What is really anything about? Like, and it's
Yeah.
about wanting to have like community and wanting to find a place in the world and wanting to make meaning of things and wanting to feel like, honestly, like safe and secure with who you are, right?
Yeah.
So like, you're touching on a lot of really good things. And why is it so hard for people to change?
There are, oh man, there's probably like 5 strong contributing factors. When we look at the central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, we take an anthropological lens and we look at survival mechanisms that human beings because this modern context of human existence is very new. We existed as a species in, the more archaic times for way longer and developed these really, really strong behavioral survival mechanisms that still come up for us today.
Can I
So you've got,
can I butt in really
yeah,
quick? It's like,
yeah.
I read a fiction book. Did you ever read The Martian by Andy Weir? See the movie The Martian?
No.
It's a good book. He wrote another book, and it's like, he put out this really good point. It was in the narrative of the story. He's like, up until like 300 or 400 years ago, like, all of existence was just about food supply, right?
Yes.
And it's only in the last like 200-ish years where like humans have started to have like a lot of humans have had to start a really like an easy food supply, quote unquote, right? So it's just like,
Yes.
I'm like, holy shit, I've never thought about it like that, but it's so true, right? So continue on, but you're touching some good stuff.
So yes, that anthropological lens,
Yes.
that one's really strong, and it's so understated in,
Yes.
like, because we feel so much guilt and shame when we're thinking about the need to make a change. It also means that there's a psychological component of, I have to take ownership of the fact that there is a maladaptive behavior. And if I run from that and I actually don't own it, then maybe it doesn't exist. And that's, a lot of people exist in what's called this pre-contemplation stage of something called the trans-theoretical model.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the small behavioral loop, is that, well, if I don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist. And you're like, ooh, but the manifestation of your life might say otherwise.
Yeah.
Like the 43 arrests that you have based on this bad behavior.
Yeah.
And so we have, again, autonomic nervous system, central nervous system, an anthropological lens, a psychological lens, and then a social support lens. A really big part of health psychology is that we use something called this biopsychosocial model. So we look at biology, we look at psychology, and we look at social. And when we start to look at, okay, so if I don't have the social support systems or the financial support systems to engage and change behavior, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking me to take on something that is way greater than the resources that I have. Again, I'm surviving here. You want me to change my eating patterns when I don't make enough for more than an $80 grocery bill a week? Like,
Yeah.
what are you saying?
Yeah.
So those 5 things for me coming together create a really small window for people to actually engage and change behavior.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have this negative stigma if you're not capable of the change behavior.
Yeah.
And that on top of all of it, and like people being judgmental or angry, or, well, if you can't enact the change behavior, then you're not deserving of help. And you have to do it first and then we'll be there.
Yeah.
It's backwards. It should be like, oh shoot, we need somebody who needs help changing. Let's step into all of these different roles and areas where we can help facilitate that.
Yeah.
So also, I guess maybe the 6th one would be our social approach, like attached to number 5 of social support is, our social support is, you only get it after you've done it, right? You
Yeah.
only get support after you've proven you deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. So go over the five things really quick again. They were hit me.
Autonomic nervous system.
Nervous system.
So my vagus nerve is a threat
Yeah.
detection system.
Yep.
Change is a lot of times a threat.
That.
Your central nervous system. So
Yep.
I've developed habits that are familiar in my body. I'm
Yep.
more apt towards doing what's familiar and comfortable. I don't like discomfort.
Yep.
Anthropological, I'm
Yep.
looking at all of these timelines and instances where human beings stayed in the same behavior for years and years that was predominantly a survival mechanism based on food. And now you're asking me to change like my workout habits?
Yeah.
And then psychologically,
Yeah.
looking at an identity shift predominantly. I think that's a really understated component of a lot of different areas of mental health, but identity shift is tough.
Yeah.
And seeing myself now as this new person, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm not ready for that. And then last of the 5 and 6 is going to be we need social support, and also our attitudes towards social support is you only get it once you deserve it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when this is the area that I really want is to work on change behaviors and getting people from that contemplation to action stage. How do
Yeah.
we get people to jump? So I have to take all of those things into consideration. And when I do that as a clinician, as a researcher, as a coach, as anything in life, a partner, a friend, I have a lot more empathy.
Yeah.
I have a greater window of understanding that this is going to be difficult and it's going to require a lot of time, patience, and resources, but I'm okay with that because the change is worth it.
Yeah, I think there's that. Thank you for the recap because that like helped me crystallize all those in my brain. And like you're 100% on it. The other thing is just it's tricky. Expectations and reality like have to, like change can be like just having a belief. Changing a belief can then dictate new action, right? So like in that regard, like if somebody believes, oh, exercise is not, if they go from believing exercise is like harmful because it's strenuous to exercise is good when it's appropriate because it will build me up. Like that's a giant belief shift that will hopefully encourage more actions down the line. But like that change is small and like in a really good thing, like that can compound. But like real change is hard. Like you have to like step back and like be like, oh, I'm like repeating that pattern again. Like this is, and that's like, and then you have to say, oh, like what is that about, right? Like, and you touched on a lot of those things, and it just helps to. I really believe like we're here to learn. Like I don't know if if there's a higher power or not, but I do think like the whole thing is like we're learning, and you just got to keep learning because the more you can just connect with like even the concepts, like I think me and you are like we're obviously directionally super correct, but like you're just talking about avoidant coping, narrative therapy, attachment theory. Like those are now concepts that I'm going to start to integrate into like my structures of thinking and how and I'm already there in some regards because like at the end of the day, like why my business is strength and kindness is because when I worked as a neurosurgery nursing assistant before physical therapy school. I was potentially thinking about going to medical school, so I got a job in a hospital. And it's like most of these people they need to be shown that like they have control over their physical body to some extent. Like keeping people in bed not good for them. It's easy.
Correct.
But like getting people up and that was some of the things I saw when I was like there. It's like what I did was I like got people moving, and then I helped the therapists and then they just needed people to be kind to them. Like you would have people come in and like doctors, nurses, and it wasn't that the doctors and nurses didn't care; they cared, but their tone and their frame was like this. They were looking at like the chart and not the person. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
You need to understand the chart, but like you need to be kind to this human who's in a very vulnerable position, right?
Yes.
So like it was like people need freaking strength and they need kindness, right? So all right, pivot, all good stuff.
Yeah.
Why do you train?
Ooh, so that rationale has taken a complete 180 over the last decade. And I used to train because my self-worth was tied very heavily towards physical performance and achievement. And I would feel shame if I didn't train. I would feel like I was losing the part of myself, the only part of myself that I was even remotely proud of, right? The athlete part. And so a lot of negative emotions used to fuel why I train. Fast forward to today, I've worked through a lot of different modalities. I've tried a lot of different things. I love to train for endurance because it's something that I am not good at inherently and continually learning. And it puts me in a position where I am a beginner and it helps me remember what it's like to begin something new. I work and with change behaviors too. When you can have that empathy and kindness for what it's like to do something for the first time because it's fresh in your head from your own experience, I think it's a very powerful thing. I think sometimes when we get really into our lane and into our area of expertise, we forget what it's like to be a beginner, and that can be a conduit for why we're not exhibiting kindness in our settings of expertise. And then I also really love now to just find the outer parameters and outer threshold of what I think I'm capable of and challenge it from that mental perspective. Not just physical, not just trying to throw numbers up, but saying like, I've been building, I've been following my program, I've been building. I want to overcome this mental block that I have around a weight, a distance, a pace, what have you, and I want to see if I talk positively to myself through this, if I can do it. And so now lifting and running and any type of experience is about how much can I believe in myself in order to execute, and what does that experience feel like? And I think honestly that pivot led me to believing that I could go back to school and do my master's, go back to school and do my PhD and my dissertation, that I could be a part of a budding field of psychology and to really work on integrating it into all spans of healthcare. And it's because I cultivated it in this setting, which is now going to be the foundation for my dissertation, and studying courage and the engagement, the willing engagement in activities that are challenging, as a cultivation of courageous behavior and hopefully a conduit for change behavior. So I really think that when we take away the pressure to perform, the guilt and shame that we feel, and we start really looking at our own internal experience, we open doors for ourselves that we never, could have imagined, and we cultivate strengths that we didn't see for ourselves, but now we get to lean back in and reach the hand out to the rest of society and say, if I can do this, you can do it too.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I think about that all the time because like I'm not jacked. I'm not like I'm a 37-year-old dad. Like I eat a shit ton of ice cream. I that's I've been really like, who doesn't want like a six pack and to be lean and to be jacked? And I'm not saying like those aren't part of my goals, but
Yeah.
I do think like if I can do some of this shit, so can just about everybody, right?
Yep.
And yeah, you're really like honestly, you need to like start to just get into a little bit of like predictive processing because it's going to be like it's exactly what you're talking about, right? So
Yeah.
we come up against a threshold, and basically what our brain is doing is like based on our narrative, do we have the resources to like execute the next thing, right? And like
Yes.
I don't know how. So my first experiences in the weight room, I just didn't feel safe. Like, and I wasn't like I wasn't like, and it wasn't from like lifting was bad for me. It was I was worried about what my buddies were gonna think about me, and I thought I was like strong, and then like I went to do like 65 pounds on a bench press, and it was stuck on my chest, and I'm like a 15-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid, and to some extent it was like good coaching is not about like imposing external systems on people. It's hey, this is what you need to do right now to get better, and that's okay. Like, and without like judgment per se. And so I think there's been literally like many years of overcoming this narrative. Literally, I'm working with a coach right now, Olympic weightlifting, super smart guy. He was on my podcast a couple weeks ago. His name's Chris Speed, and I sent him a squat video, and he's like, dude, you're built to squat a house. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I have for the longest time thought like I'm not built to squat. So
Yeah.
just somebody being like, like, and we see this all the time. I don't know how replicable those studies are, but like where they say they randomize it, and you can't really do this with kids because it's unethical. But like this kid has we have positive expectations for this kid. We have negative expectations for this kid. Who do you think
Yes.
performs better over the course of a year, right? I think they did it
Yeah.
with rats, right? So,
Yeah.
but just having people believe in you and say like, yeah, like, hey, what do you want this to be? What do you think you can do? And I think you
Yeah.
can do that. Like that's so much of my business is
Yes.
people come to me with struggles and internal narratives, and I'm like, I think you can do it. I think it's just a matter
Yeah.
of how do we get you there, right?
Yeah.
So, but you're still competitive. Like you're like you want to win, right?
Not when I do endurance events. Endurance events are
It
about
is a little
finishing.
bit of a different, yeah. Like
Yeah, yeah,
when you're like when you're doing something where I did like this backyard ultra like a month ago. It was really fun, and I used to
yeah,
run. I used to run a lot and hard, and I would have been really competitive, but like
yeah.
that's also like it's a really safe event is what I would almost call it. Like because you run 4 miles,
It's a
you do it
small
again.
loop, right?
Yeah, you do
Yeah,
it
yeah,
again,
yeah,
four
yeah,
miles,
yeah, yeah,
4.2 miles over and over again. But the
yeah,
dude who won that, like, I'm like, that I'm not competing with that guy. He was just like, we were like 30 miles in, and he was like having a good time. Where I was like,
yeah.
sucker, right?
They look unfazed, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Are you human?"
yeah. Whereas, and like,
um,
so yeah, tell me about
yeah,
like, because it's okay to be. This is the other thing. I think this is what I'm
yeah,
touching on. It's okay to be competitive, but at the end of the day, it's
yeah.
it's like me versus me, and you're there to play, right?
I was gonna say, even this last strongman, I went to the strongman national championships in September because I won a strongman event in San Diego before I left, and I this was one of the first times at an event too where I was interacting with the other competitors in like a joking, almost team-like way,
Mm-hmm.
and my approach was truly like, and I was also undertrained for this event because I didn't have access to a keg out here. I'm in South Carolina now, so I didn't have a strongman gym that had a keg. I didn't have some of the equipment necessary to like train directly the stimulus. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like doing makeshift workouts in my local gym here. So I went in again with some managed expectations, but I was so just internally driven on like, okay, what can you do
Yeah.
and how can you push your threshold? And it was competitive in that very internal sense. It was also one of the most I've ever enjoyed a competition.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think that when I was a kid, especially because like, there was, in the Bay Area, top 10 female soccer players, and some of us played in the same club, some of us played in rival clubs, but we were constantly being pit against one another by coaches, by fans, by parents, what have you. And so I was very externally driven when I played soccer. And there was a lot of stress and a lot of just like not great feelings sometimes before games where I was still like, competitive and wanted to win, but my focus was out there on them and like,
yeah.
well, what if so and so shows up and she does this, or what if, or if little things went wrong, I would catastrophize and be like, well, shoot, like I don't have the right shin guards, this is going to be the worst game of my life. Whereas like going in with the mentality like, I'm just going to take the chips where they fall and see what I can do and push some thresholds. It was, I guess like, I don't know, relaxed competitive. And
Yeah.
it was fun for me. Do I think that every human being might benefit from a period of time where they're a little bit externally competitive and they deal and experience that stress? Perhaps. I think that a lot of people learn a lot, and like I know I learned a lot. You have to kind of do a pros and cons of, does the damage outweigh the good, or does the good outweigh the damage?
Yeah.
So I would say that's up in the air, but that's how my competition mindset has shifted for sure.
Yeah. I've never met anybody who's like, I mean, especially like, let's talk like people, even my first powerlifting meet, I was like, I frankly was afraid because like, oh, you're not going to, I'm like, of course you're not going to win it. Like there's dudes that squat like 700 pounds in your
Yeah,
category. Like it's
yeah,
okay. And,
yeah,
you know, like people go into people like I literally I take a group, me, it's like women, it's a women's barbell event, and I take 16 women to this event, and it's for fun. Yes, there's a competitive thing, but I had a lady who's like, she's 63 years old, and I'm like, you should do it, and she's like, well, will I win? I'm like, why do you care?
Yeah.
Like, but people, like, there's this like certain amount of like, if I'm not winning, what's the point? And it's like, the
Yeah.
point is so you learn. The point, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, it's like fun to compete against other people, and you know, there is a piece of that, but like, you just go do the best you can. I've just never met
Yeah.
anybody who's like, I think, satisfied with like this external competitive nature, right? And like, I grew up loving Michael Jordan. I freaking love Michael Jordan. I kind of think, I don't know what Michael Jordan's like. He's probably pretty happy in his mansion wherever in California, but he was also kind of a dickhead, and like, I don't think he's got a lot of good relationships because of that, right? And who
Yeah.
knows? I don't want to speak. I love Michael Jordan, Michael, if you listen to this, but yeah, and like, where honestly, you know, just to like talk about like, I think LeBron James is probably somebody who people probably are more like well liked, and I think it's because he's cultivated more of like a team environment, right? Not that Jordan didn't do that, but it's just there is this desire that like it is good to compete, but it's not about other people all the time. It's about
Yeah.
just improving yourself. So,
Yeah.
all right, I know you did the Ironman 70.3,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Half.
Is that your first one of those?
That was my first triathlon. That was my first Ironman. I learned so much the day of, and I hadn't really been training before I did it. Things picked up with research and school in the month of October, and so I hadn't swam in like a month and a half. Hadn't biked over like 15 miles. I ran a decent amount, but nothing close to a half marathon. So I was a little bit undertrained, and truly the difference maker in the day for me was just PMA, positive mental attitude,
Yeah.
and fuel.
Yeah.
And it's crazy like how much we think so much of performance or doing something is just about physical capacity.
Yeah.
Where like I did something pretty difficult, undertrained, but it's because I controlled some other variables that are really important.
Yeah.
Which I think too, like as we broaden the scope of health psychology and we start looking at like how do we really help human beings succeed, it's getting them into spaces like integrative healthcare, where you have PTs and registered dietitians and whatever else someone might think is necessary in helping someone to cultivate that group of things that help make performing better, as opposed to just targeting one and one at a time. So that's my big takeaway from the Ironman, is that you might be not great in one area, but if you really uphold in other areas, you can still do some cool things.
You're getting me curious to just go do a undertrained half Ironman to see how it goes. I mean, it sounds. The swim scares the crap out of me, but that would be fun. So,
Yeah,
like,
that was the one I think bonus that I had, and even in talking to people who are curious, I've been trying to finagle people into doing a full with me. I don't want to do that one by myself because it is boring and you can't listen to music, and I'm like,
oh, see, yeah,
17, yeah.
that would crush me.
Yeah,
I need
you're
something.
just alone with your thoughts for the whole race.
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe if I get somebody to do it with me. But the majority of like the hesitation comes from the swim is tough and drowning. So
Yeah. I don't know. I've never really done a whole lot of open water swimming, so
I took on a lot of water.
yeah. I feel like, well, but I feel like also you have a little bit of a background in that type of stuff.
I
It
do,
seems
yeah,
like, so.
yeah.
All right. As we wrap up, what are your closing thoughts? Like, maybe okay. We'll go from this frame. I'm a I'm a I'm a male in my I'm a heteronormal male. Or honestly, look, you're just a human being in 2025. There are it's honestly kind of a shitstorm of this is what I sense. It's overwhelming. Like we have overwhelming news that, let's be honest, people didn't have access to until the last 40 years, and now the amount of news that we get on a daily basis. We have social media, which honestly is like a weird drug that hijacks us. And we have like a lot of our energy can be one more. Have you ever read you know Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi Flow? Have you ever heard of that book?
Mm-mm.
I'm just gonna send you like the popular psychology but that book's really awesome.
Cool.
The Theory of Flow. I think you would but it
I
is
think I do know it.
basically he talks about it as like a good life is basically there's our psychic energy is subject to entropy. So like basically like having enough focus to get things done is really powerful, but our energy is pulled in so many different directions that it's really hard for people to cultivate like a flow state.
I know this author. He's a professor at the Claremont McKenna
Yeah.
psychology. Yep, yeah.
He's like
I know.
a Hungarian
Yes,
psychologist.
yep. I know that.
Um,
Yep.
But like, yeah, I think that's what so much of it is. I actually read this like it's like somebody who's a marketer. So this statistic you can't really trust. They're like 80% of the 80 to 90% of the time humans are like distracted. There's like multiple things going on. And so with all that frame, like, what are your tips for people?
I want to go beyond some of the normal tips that are already out there.
Yes.
So like limit your phone use time. I think that one of the most important things is to come back to the quote that you had said at the beginning, where the best thing for your nervous system is another human being. The worst thing for your nervous system can also be another human being. And so community, when wanting to engage in a new behavior, when wanting to work through feelings of loneliness, when wanting to just do a lot of things, having community social support at your foundation is something that I would like people to spend more intentional time on cultivating, and going out into the world with their phone down and meeting people. Should you meet someone who does not align with your value system or doesn't seem like they're going to be a great social support, feel empowered in setting a boundary and saying, this pathway is not for me. There will be another pathway. So this idea of, I think some people are like, I'm going to try one community and I'm just going to dive in and I'm going to sign all the contracts on the first day and this is where I'm going to stay. That mentality of not giving ourselves the opportunity to see if it's a good value fit can sometimes do more harm than good. Yeah. So that high level of scrutiny and community cultivation, if we start there and then you want to tack on things on top of that, like, well, I want to train for a half Ironman or I want to train for a half marathon, you're probably going to find someone in your community that you can work on those things with and feel a little bit better about that change behavior that you're engaging with. So that's one of the big ones that I think as human beings we have to come back to right now. I think that when you do that too, you start to realize that a lot of the anger and projection that exists in the world is on our phones. Yeah. And then when we get to these human-to-human interactions, you start realizing how good and amazing and wonderful people are. And so being able to come back to those human-to-human moments as a way to counterbalance some of the anger and things that we see in the world is a really wonderful way to go about that.
I love it. I'm going to say, get off your phone. As someone who spends much damn time on their phone.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. It is community, not like thinking that there's only one out there, right? And that you have to, because that often happens. So Laura Gordon, where do people find you if they want to connect with you?
My social media is the @ Laura Health Psych. And then my email is gordon.v.laura@gmail.com if you have any questions or want resources. I love sending book recommendations. I love sending podcasts for people who are like, I just want to hear more about whatever topic you brought up. I love sending those out. So you can absolutely shoot me an email or find me on social.
I'm happy to receive any book recommendations you have or podcasts, please.
I should make an Excel doc and
You
then just
should.
start firing it off.
Yeah, you
That'd be
should. That would
good.
be
Yeah.
dope. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been
Yeah.
really great chat. I appreciate you a ton. Good luck on the rest of your studies and your dissertation. And then, yeah, please stay in touch. I'll get this out soon, and I'll definitely link your Instagram into the show notes so that people can find you. Cool.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Awesome.